Everybody, thanks again for joining us on the Evolution Security Podcast. One thing I forgot to mention last time is the fact that my brother, my tactical twin, was on the line with us, and we just always have such a great time. Eric, I just wanted to make sure I say shout out to my tactical twin before we get going here.
Right on. Shout out to my tactical twin on the other side.
Well, I'll tell you what. So we start thinking about topics we'd like to get guests on the show for. And I couldn't think of a better guest to come on and talk to us about the dynamics of interpersonal human relationships. And that's you, Tim. Mr. Tim Herron. Wait, Eric, did you hand me the wrong?
I think you do happen to have the wrong outline.
Oh shit. Okay. Okay. Tim Herron, the Grand Master in USPSA and Master in IDPA, and a long list of national and state championship titles. So, in all honesty, back to point, we could not think of a better person to have on to pick your brain about shooting technique. Eric and I have been, it kind of ebbs and flows, but I am taking the Range Master Instructor Development course here, and as we speak, a week and a half. So I'll be honest, I've been practicing my butt off. I know I can pass the qual, but I want to do the best I can.
Sure.
So I'm practicing my butt. I'll tell you what, I don't think I've ever practiced as much for anything, any particular class like this. So I'm pretty stoked about it.
So Aaron, I don't mean to cut you off so rudely. So what you're saying is you want to shoot perfect scores like Tim did when he and I took the IDC together some time ago.
Bro, that is exactly the goal. And anyone that's familiar with Lenny Basham's protocol with affirmation statements, that is literally written in my affirmation statement.
Excellent.
So, but all joking aside, sorry to throw you off with that, guys. I just thought it'd be nice to bring us in and make sure that our guests who may not know you know that you are very well versed in this topic, and we've had you on a few times. So, Eric, let's get in the show notes, and it's been a while since I've seen the episode numbers, but if we can provide those episode numbers for people to go back on.
Sure can.
I'll say this: the last interview we had you on, Tim, was one of our bigger shared episodes that we've had in a long time. So a lot of people dug it. A lot of people brought it up on some forums that I'm on, and just, hey, check out this interview. I'm so and so. My handle's Rock Guitarist, and hey, you guys need to listen to this Tim Herron interview that Rock Guitarist had.
Excellent.
Well, and I'm just going to add to that, Tim. Aaron and I had, we obviously are an eclectic show. We're very heavy-handed with combatives. Of course, that probably comes from my influence more than Aaron's. Of course, he is a participant in all that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we kind of drifted away from shooting performance, like we had done a lot more in the past where it was so heavy. And Aaron and I were talking, we're like, man, we gotta do more shooting performance, because to be frank, a lot of our audience really likes that, and we want to serve our audience as best we can. And again, your name came up. We're like, man, we got to have Tim on because he's a preeminent expert. So I just wanted to point that out.
Awesome. No, I appreciate you having me back on. I definitely always honored to be a guest.
Excellent. Well, so let's jump right into some topics we have here.
Okay.
Let's start out with to move up in class is the question, right? So, for instance, just an example, maybe someone is an expert in IDPA and they're kind of at a plateau, and want to make it to master. If they're maybe USPSA A class, they're trying to hit that master also. That's what making those moves is always in the small points. It's always in the nuance and the granularity. We've hit all the big stuff, getting up to expert or A class. We've gotten pretty good at shooting, etc. But then there's always those small things that take you to the next level. So, could you kind of give us some information on maybe specific types of skills you think make the difference between an A class shooter and a master class shooter?
Yep.
And
You
maybe
ready
if
to be blown away?
hey man, let's.
There's
I know what you're
none.
going to say.
There's none. There's no difference between the skill set needed as a B class to the skill set needed to be an A class to the skill set needed to be an M or a GM. The skill sets that you possess as a B class shooter are enough to get you to GM, right? So we're talking about just basic shooting skills. So let's break it down to like the true basics. Let's say draw to first shot on a 7-yard target. Why do we use that? Because that seems to be the gold standard that everybody tries to measure themselves against, right? So a 1 second draw to the first shot, to an A zone hit at 7 yards. We're looking at, let's say, a 1.2 second shot to shot reload to a 7-yard target to A zone hits. We're looking at possessing the skills to be able to split the gun, be able to fire two shots consecutively in shot splits that are, say, 0.20. And I would say, honestly, being able to just be able to hit the A zone regardless of time at 25 yards, right? So those are the overall skill sets needed, in my personal opinion, to actually just get you to even to say B class. So the difference between a B class, an A class, a master or grand master, or let's say from the aspects of like expert to master in IDPA, is not in the skill sets. It's not in a like any sort of a delinear like differential between the two skill sets. It has to do with consistency of execution, right? So if we were to back the train up just a little bit and we look at like how the USPSA classification system is broken down, right? So classification system for USPSA is broken down by taking your best 6 of your most recent 8 classifiers that you shoot, classifier stages that you shoot. So then USPSA takes the best 6 of those 8 and they wrap that into a rolling average. And then that rolling average, based on how you perform on those classifiers, that rolling average continues to roll off. So the next one that you shoot, let's say classifier number 9, then rolls off the oldest of those 6 of 8 that you look at. So you're constantly looking at a continuously rolling average. That rolling average, of course, is then made up based on percentages of whatever the high hit factor is. So like the high hit factor per classification is set by basically a list or panel of shooters that have shot X amount of score on that particular classifier. Well, that score actually is based on consistency as well, right? So when you start to break down the percentages, like a B class shooter is able to shoot within 60%, or basically it's 60 to 74.9% of that high hit factor of that particular skill set that's being tested in the classifier. A class is 75% to 84.9%. And then master is 85% to 94.9%. And then GM is 95% to 100% of whatever that skill set is based on those percentages of execution. To simplify that, let's look at just a basic skill set. So let's go back to like the draw to a first shot A zone hit in 1 second. And actually, let's simplify it. Let's say 1.2 seconds. Draw to first shot to an A zone hit in 1.2. Now, if I asked both of you, do you guys both possess the ability to draw and shoot an A zone hit in 1.2 seconds at 7 yards? Right
Yes,
now.
sir. Yes, sir. Right
Immediately.
now.
Right now. If I gave
Yes,
you
sir.
10 attempts at it, Could you do it 10 out of 10 times?
I would say right now I have been executing that 1.2 in that time frame.
Okay. So this is the thing though. This isn't like, okay, at the best in my practice session. This isn't when I'm completely warmed up. This is like you stand up on camera right now and the whole world's watching. Can you draw and absolutely put a shot in an A zone in 1 to 1.2 seconds on demand 10 out of 10 times? And if you don't, then we got to look at the percentage level of execution that you can, consistency, right? So the difference I look at things like this would be then a B class shooter is able to, well, actually, even all the way down to a D class, like a brand new, just recently classified shooter in USPSA. A D class shooter should be able to do that 30 to 40% of the time, which means out of 10 opportunity, 10 chances in a row, they can probably hook up and do that in like 3 to 4 times out of 10. The C class guy is going to be able to do it 5 times out of 10. The B class shooter should be able to do it 6 to 7 times out of 10. The A class guy is going to be able to do it 7 to 8 times out of 10. The M class shooter should be able to do that 8 to 9 times out of 10. And the Grandmaster level shooter should be able to do that particular skill set 10 out of 10 times.
Well, then maybe I'm giving myself too much credit.
Right. Well, it's not that you're giving yourself too much credit.
Mm-hmm.
That is merely one test, though,
right?
In this, in the wheelhouse of skill sets being tested. But if we start breaking down the skill sets themselves, everybody here possesses the ability to be able to, let's say, even press the trigger 2 times as fast as they possibly can, physically hang onto the gun and press the trigger in 0.2 splits. That's not a superhuman skill set, right? But can you possess the skill set to do 0.2 splits to an A zone hit at 10 yards on demand every time? And if it was on demand every single time, right, and you can do it 10 out of 10 times, well, then there is one skill set out of the multitude of little skill sets that we're testing that may be Grandmaster worthy.
I know I'm not doing that right now.
I can do
on demand
20 splits or 18 splits, but I can do 18 splits and maybe I hook up 5 out of 10 times or 7 out of 10 times, then that gives us a better look really at kind of where we are as shooters. The difference between a class shooter and an M class shooter, or an M class shooter and a Grandmaster level shooter, is not that the GM has some special skill set that the M or the A class or even the B class shooter has. You know what they have? They have an inventory of consistency that the B class, A class, M class guy does not possess yet.
Nice.
Want to get better at shooting? Want to move up? You tired of being at that plateau? Stop chasing other skill sets. Start really pursuing perfection in the skill sets that you already have.
Nice.
You should be pursuing consistency. On-demand consistency. I do not own a skill set, and I tell this in every class to every student that I teach too. I do not own or possess that particular skill set until I can do it 5 out of 5 times, which then means I should be able to do it 10 out of 10 times on demand. If I can't do it 5 out of 5, it's not a skill that I own yet. It's one I'm still working on, but It's not one that I have truly mastered yet.
Well, I'd like to say this, that I've not heard the classifier system or of USPSA explained quite articulately like that. And, I'm not going to bag on IDPA because I usually shoot IDPA because it's what was available in the area when Eric and I were here,
Sure.
25 years ago. And it's just kind of been the sport that I've stuck with. I really enjoy it. I'm competing at the expert level, kind of. It's kind of apropos that we're talking about this. I just haven't been super, super serious about it. I want to get back into it again soon after I get done with a couple of these classes. But point being, you can one day shoot master on a classifier during a match.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the only time you've done it in a month, but you're class up to master. So, and that's cool, and that's neat. But
right.
But what the USPSA standards,
right, It's on a rolling
are more
right.
that's a better measure.
I agree with that.
Absolutely. I mean,
And
anybody could, and that's the thing, right? If let's say you're a sharpshooter, is it sharpshooter marksman expert or is it marksman sharpshooter expert? I think it's
Yeah.
marksman,
marksman
sharpshooter
sharpshooter expert,
expert.
right? So if you're a sharpshooter, and let's say you possess the skills one out of, like, say 3 out of 10 times to shoot a master class on the 5x5. And let's say you go to a local match and by God, they've set up the 5x5 and you're going to shoot it. And that happens to be one of the 3 out of 10 times that you actually can hook up and shoot the 5x5 to master. Now you've made master in a division that unfortunately you don't possess the consistency yet to be able to compete at that level. Right? It looks great on paper. And there's a lot of guys in USPSA that do the exact same thing. They practice a particular classifier, or they try the hero or zero method, which means they're trying to swing for the fences and shoot as absolutely fast and as ridiculously out of control as they can, and they just happen to hook up. And if they do that, then that might be what gets them over the cusp of whatever, kind of wherever they seem plateaued at, and might push them into the next classification before they're actually able or capable of competing at that level of consistency. I tell people all the time, like, stop trying to push your classification ahead of your skill set. Your classification follows your current level of skill. And if your current level of skill doesn't support the consistency needed to make M or GM, then stop trying to artificially push it there before you're ready. Because all you're going to do is shoot yourself in the foot, like, theoretically, hypothetically speaking.
That's well put, Tim. And I think I'll just say it this way: it's going to be encouraging to a lot of people,
Sure.
frankly, to understand where. Because yes, there's a lot of folks. I mean, I at one time had that master class goal many years ago, and I'm just going to tell on myself. I mean, I definitely worked towards that goal, and with Mike Brown, and I achieved it back in 2003. This is before they really were had their shit together. But I do not shoot that level right now. And I do know for certain that I probably made master class and I was still really only consistent as an expert class shooter.
There's a lot of folks that do that, right? Like I said, there's guys that try to push they kind of artificially push their classification ahead of where they're actually at as a shooter. And then generally you don't see those shooters compete at a lot of big matches, or actually they kind of fall off the bandwagon of competing, period. And generally it's because they've pushed themselves into a realm or into a classification or a skill set that they were ill prepared to actually compete in. And then they get burned out because now the chase is really on and they don't want to pursue like the level of consistency that like breeds that actual classification. And they tell themselves like, well, I just did it because I wanted to earn, that belt. I wanted to earn that notch. I wanted to earn that classification before I was, before I was too experienced or too old or whatever, too burned out to really, continue on that journey. And okay, that's great. I know quite a few of those guys. They make GM and they're a flash in the pan. They make GM and then they're just that immediately they move out because they can't compete at that level because they've artificially pushed that classification ahead of what their true skill set is. You see it happen a lot again in IDPA. And this is also the guys that are shooting at expert that are really, marksmen, or they're masters that really can barely compete, at kind of like the beginning stages of expert, but they shot a great 5x5 and they love having that M letter next to their name on their membership card. But then they wonder why, they continuously get wrecked at major matches. And then you don't see those guys compete anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely one to advocate to people like relax, just calm yourselves, right? Like let it come to you when it's ready to, like truly focus on the pursuit. And so, I mean, this going back to like other combatives, that BJJ, for instance, like, Eric, I know you're a huge practitioner in jujitsu, right? I doubt very many people get very, very far practicing BJJ, going to a gym the very first time, and they look a professor right in the eyes and they go, you know what? In 5 years, I make him black belt. That just, it doesn't freaking happen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like
No,
at
it
some point
doesn't.
in time, once you kind of get past blue, your pursuit of colors of belt go away, because then you realize like, oh shit, the journey is in just going to the gym and rolling and practicing and pushing a skill and testing that particular technique or skill set amongst a broader audience. Sometimes it means going to other gyms and testing again against other practitioners with a slightly different art, right? And then it becomes a whole lot less about, like, I never really hear many people talking about like, oh man, can't wait to get my purple belt, or oh man, I'm 2 months away from getting my brown belt, or oh man, I'm getting ready to test for black belt. That shit just happens when it happens.
Yeah.
And why don't we apply that same approach to shooting is beyond me.
Well, Tim, I that was a brilliant way of putting it, and I think again, our audience members, because of many of us are practitioners in jujitsu and the
Sure.
other combative arts. So yeah, that is an excellent way to put it, man. You know, it is true. I and you also succinctly said, folks really do try to get after that blue belt, but
Absolutely.
then after that, it's
Yeah, you learn real
you
quick
let it
that it's all
happen.
about the color of the belt then, right?
Yeah.
And we like I've seen, we see this all the time in all kinds of sports, and the guys that are truly chasing just a belt color are generally the guys that, they're hard at it for like the first year or two. And then because they're not progressing to the level that they think they need to progress, they either go
Hmm.
to, some other gym, or they drop out of the sport completely. Oh, it's too hard. Oh, my professor was too difficult. Oh, he was too strict. Oh, he wouldn't let me push to the next belt. Well, then I'll go to some other fly by night gym and push for it there. And it's like, okay, great. So you got some dudes that you can pay for the opportunity to belt up. And then what? Well, now you're a black belt that gets absolutely wrecked by a high practicing blue belt or purple belt.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
come
yeah.
on, dude.
That doesn't happen as often as with
No.
other systems, but you hit it on the head, buddy.
Right.
That is becoming a little more prevalent in
Well, you see
jujitsu.
it all the time in other martial arts too, right? Guys are like, "Oh man, I want to be a black belt in jujitsu and I want to do it in 5 years." Right? I've had other guys that I know that have been practitioners for 10, 15, 20 years that are like, "Oh great, you want to make black belt in like a certain time frame? Go take taekwondo. You can be a black belt in
Whoops.
18 months." It's like, "What?" Yeah, like if you're
Yeah,
truly
And before you're, and sorry to anyone
exactly.
out there, but and by the time you're 13,
Exactly. Exactly. I went
yeah,
to like junior high with a couple of those kids, like, oh my
yeah,
God, he's a second degree black belt in Taekwondo. Dude, that kid would absolutely get demolished in a locker room fight,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
I keep telling on myself during all this. That was my first black belt was in Taekwondo. But I quickly discovered otherwise,
Sure.
and that's when I moved over to Jeet Kune Do concepts and Muay Thai and then my original introduction to jujitsu back
And
then.
truly,
But
there's
yeah,
nothing wrong with any, like in my true experience, like, there's nothing wrong with any martial art.
yeah,
I mean, there's some that seem a little more hokey than others, but I mean, you learn regimen. You learn to like you learn some discipline and how to practice and the art of practice and the journey, right? And to respect your fellow and things like that, which is great. But we don't apply, like, even though shooting is a martial art, just like any other martial art,
mhm,
but we don't apply the same concepts. We don't apply the same discipline to shooting like we do in other forms of martial arts. That I think that because that's what's missing, that a lot of people get this, again, they get this artificial ballooning of skill sets. They want to be able to pick up a gun in 6 months, be like, I have arrived, I've achieved. And it's like, man, like, slow down and like stop to smell the roses once in a while.
Yeah, I think a lot of people need to hear that. I mean, all you have to do is look at the Instagram heroes and all the stuff
Sure.
like that. And the firearms community, unfortunately, I wish it wasn't this way, but it just seems to be the realm of the arts
Sure.
that the ego is so tied to it that it's. I just wish it wasn't that way.
Oh, you and me
Um,
both.
So, and Will said, I've reflected a lot on, Aaron and I spoke about this a lot recently. I, for one, and we talked about a couple episodes ago, I've been on the road a lot with my day job, and my live fire was next to non-existent for close to 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And it was non-existent for 3. Um, and man, a lot. I mean, the biggest thing that suffered for me and disappointed me the most was my on demand accuracy at distance.
Mm-hmm.
That I had really felt I locked that in, and that made me reflect on, okay, what is really important to me in my shooting right now, and it really is, in all honesty, you just so well said it, is gaining my consistency to a much higher level than I honestly ever have.
So that's what it really
So,
is. And so I've done a lot of the research and a lot of the homework, especially when it comes to like the USPSA classification or the skill sets required, like to even make a GM, right? And here's the actual truth of it. Everybody thinks to make GM you've got to have like these superhuman skill sets, and you don't. So if you want to get a pen and paper and write these down, I'll be willing to share this with you, right?
I'm got it right here, buddy.
Average split times to be a GM, 0.20 to 0.22. If you possess the ability on demand at 10 yards or at 7 to 10 yards, being able to shoot 0.20 to 0.22 splits, then that's a GM level. That's a GM ability level of skill. Draw to first shot. Everybody really starts to hone in on. I must have a sub 1 second draw to first shot. I think is complete and utter BS. You can actually have a draw to first shot on a 7-yard target to an A zone of 1.25, and that is plenty fast enough to make GM on any classifier. Shot to shot reload, we're talking 1.4 seconds. You could even get away with a 1.5 second reload. So these crazy skill sets, right, of sub 1 second draws and 1 second reloads and 0.15 splits, it's all bogus, guys. It's absolutely bogus. If you possess the ability to be able to split the gun in 0.20 fastest, right, on the closest targets, and you can draw the gun in 1.25 to an A zone hit at 7 yards, and you can reload the gun shot to shot in 1.4 seconds, like those are the hard skills. Really, that's the only hard skills needed. Everything beyond that, right, are kind of like are floating variables. Transitions. Transitions on a target from, let's say it's 7 yards and those targets are separated by, a yard apart between them. You need to have transitions that pretty well match your splits, let's say within reason. I'd say 0.30, 0.30 to 0.35 transitions on a close target. On a far target, very, very wide transitions, 0.50 to 0.60. You
And
need
then
to
far.
not be over confirming
Can
sight
you repeat that
distance.
one more time? I can rewind the
Yeah,
video, but
like shoulder
what
to
was the
shoulder
far
transition,
targets?
like targets that are shoulder to shoulder. If you
Hmm.
possess transitions that are in the 0.25 to 0.30 realm, and that's A zone to A zone. And then
Hmm.
on wide targets, like anything farther than, like, say, 7 to 10 yards wide between the targets, being able to like effectively move the gun from one target to the next in 0.50 to 0.65, you're solid.
Good
Now,
deal.
again, those are to A zone hits. That's not just throwing the gun up a brown
Right.
and just whacking the trigger.
Hey,
Like, that is a legit aim of the gun. So how do you do that? Right? It's confirming the sights to as little as necessarily possible, right? To an acceptable shot. And then that is immediately as you fire the shot, then getting the gun in your eyes, moving to the next target as quickly as possible. That way you're not validating hits after you've shot them. And if you do those things, like I said, like welcome to GM. Now you just have to do it 10 out of 10 times all the time.
The I mean, we got to key in on this because I love the way you answered the first question, and what it comes down to is consistency, and that's what we're hearing here too. You give these metrics,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people, right, could hit those
Sure.
sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, so the GM, you got to do that 10 out of 10 times.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I like it.
And yeah, I love hearing it put that way because, I mean, it might be trite to say, oh, just, being an amazing shooter is the fundamentals done extremely well. That may be true, but at the same time, that's not as concrete as what we're spelling out
Right.
here.
You still have to have a ceiling of some kind. You got to understand where that threshold's at. But the threshold isn't as high as everybody makes it out to be.
Hmm.
Right? Like every single one of those things that you guys wrote down are attainable at a basic human level.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how attainable consistently they are is where the practice comes into. And then maybe pushing some of those skill sets to a little bit faster so that you have an inventory of that skill set available to do on demand. Great. But don't think for a minute you have to possess skill sets that are above and beyond what I just laid out there for you. And okay, if I do that one and done, or okay, I have to be faster than all of those thresholds. No, you just have to be consistent to all of those metrics, and you're going to be solid.
Well, I did want to say this real quick. I was watching a clip of you the other day, and I was watching you reload, and I was thinking, okay, you're reloading faster than the reactionary gap that we have when we're listening to the beep go off on the timer. I was like, man, that that doesn't seem fair, but actually it is because you've practiced those reloads
Sure.
a million times.
Sure.
It's just stupid fast,
Well, and
man.
the thing, like practicing those kind of reloads, I mean, in fact, just yesterday, I kind of set an all-time personal record for myself at like 0.73,
Hmm.
shot to shot reloads. Is that something that I possess the ability to be able to do in a match? No. And it's not something I've even been looking to pursue doing in a match setting because that level of skill is not necessary. However,
Hmm.
being able to do a 0.73 like at my absolute threshold of human performance makes a zero point 0.9 to a 1.1 reload on demand seem like slow motion to me.
Hmm.
It just becomes like, oh, so a reload on a 25-yard piece of steel, bing, reload, bing, and being able to do that load and regain a sight picture and fire the next shot in like 1.21. Well, that becomes super easy now. It's because I'm pushing this skill set just in dry fire and then confirming with just a little bit of live fire, just to see what's out there. So I'd say give myself another week if I continue to pursue that that particular like skill set. I think midpoint sixes would be in the cards for me in 3 or 4 more days. Now it's how much more time do I want to invest in something for very little like actual match return? Nah, it's yet to be seen.
Nice,
But it's
Tim.
but it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
It is fun to go that fast and kind of prove to yourself and others that you can.
Well,
Well,
Tim, Aaron, I apologize
yeah.
if I can ask one quick question based
Sure.
on our metrics that we just spoke about.
Mm-hmm.
For clarity for our audience, um, a bulk of that developing those matrix skills is still dry, right? Are
100%.
we? Yep. I
Yep.
just wanted to make sure that I was making that
100%.
point.
The only
I
thing that you
assumed,
probably
but
need a little bit of live fire on is probably going to be to confirm shot splits to actual A zone hits because of the gun recoiling and your ability to grip the gun in a manner that consistently has the gun lifting and returning to the same spot. But I mean, everything else hard skill wise, That's all done in dry fire. All done
Nice.
in dry fire.
Nice. Back to you, Aaron.
Oh, I was just saying, when you're saying, hey, is that skill level needed? And then you said maybe not, but you're creating that margin of skill level
Correct.
to draw from. But then you also still said, hey, but it's fun. It's
Sure.
fun. PRs are fun for my boys that work out like crazy.
Absolutely.
And the wall behind me, all these guitars,
Mm-hmm.
making being able to play 30-second notes at 150 beats per minute is not going to get me any gigs, but it sure is fun at home.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the same thing too. PRs at the gym, being able to put up, bench press or deadlift a particular, personal record weight isn't what made you strong. What made you strong might have been the pursuit of that, but the PR was just was like an after effect, right? It's not really the goal. The goal was to grow stronger, to get bigger, like whatever the case may be. And then the PR is just something that you kind of tested about to look at a metric to kind of see how far you've come. All right. And so having PRs is great, but living and dying by the personal record is not where you want to be.
Yeah.
Whether it be as a shooter, as a martial artist practitioner, as a musician, as a, as a gym junkie, like they're great to have, but they're not the ultimate goal.
Well, Tim, and a lot of our listeners understand this. I think for the most part, we understand this, but I think it's always so important when we make such a finer point on these very important, like almost crucial training principles.
Mm-hmm.
Is when Aaron was talking about PRs with his boys and how you brought up the parallel in lifting, right? And to get those PRs and anything in weightlifting, guess what it is? To grow and get stronger, it's
Sure.
consistency. If it's getting good at jiu-jitsu, and really getting good at jiu-jitsu is consistency. And of
Absolutely.
course, we're talking about consistency in shooting. And I know that's no profound epiphany. The problem is that a bulk of us trying to attain certain skills, we aren't putting in the consistency that we should.
Right. I think a lot of it's because we just get into the habit. We're so limited, or we limit ourselves in time to go to
Yep,
the range,
exactly. You
right?
just hit it.
And when
We
we
are
limit
limiting
ourselves in
ourselves.
time to the range, like the fact is like how often do you limit yourself when you go to the gym and start rolling with somebody? Most of the time you lose track of time and you're like, man, I want to be here for 2 or 3 hours, especially when you're working on a particular skill set, and then like Aaron, same way with all those guitars in the back, like I promise you don't limit yourself to like, you know what? I'm just going to play for 20 minutes. I mean, there's probably certain days you do that. And then there's other times you pick up the guitar and you're like, holy shit, I've been at this now for 2 or 3 hours. How did time just get away from me?
Yep.
And I think in order to get really good at pistol shooting, that same pursuit of that passion needs to happen. And most of us, it's not. It's a chore. Well, I got to load up the car and I got to, I only have a certain amount of resources. Oh, I can only shoot 200 rounds today. Or, man, I only have 20 minutes to really go to the range and shoot. So everything then becomes a pursuit of a PR at the range, because spending time on the range just repping out and doing the dirty work isn't fun. It's not sexy. It's not attractive. It's not, but chasing a PR, like chasing a shot to shot reload or chasing that one shot draw, makes us think that what we're doing in that pursuit is worthwhile. Now, I can tell you right now, you could have done all that shit at home and saved yourself a hell of a lot of ammo and the trip to the range. Like, go to the range with a goal and go to the range to really to validate the skill sets that you are actually then practicing and working on at home. If you want to get good at pistol shooting, you need to pursue it the same way you pursue any other passion. You can't just go to the gym, can't go to go to the range for 20 minutes and expect to become the shooter you want to be. Just like you couldn't go to the gym and go do 2 exercises one day a week and then expect to be, a Jay Cutler or a Ronnie Coleman. It just doesn't work that way. you know?
Bringing up Ronnie Coleman.
Well, yeah.
I've heard Ronnie Coleman, his name, a million times. Now, who's the guy they talk about now? Man, Sam Sulek.
Yeah.
The dude literally just films himself driving his Camry around and talking about nothing, and he gets like 12 million views.
Sure.
It's freaking crazy.
But, at the same time, I can promise you guys like the Gracie's family didn't just get good at jujitsu by going out, in their backyard or whatever and rolling with each other once a week for 20 minutes. It becomes a passion. It becomes a lifelong pursuit of something. And shooting is no different. You want to get good at shooting, you've got to be willing to put in the work, actual work. Sometimes that means it's ugly. Sometimes it means you miss a lot. Sometimes that grind, excuse my language, but fucking sucks. It does. But then, when you get past a little hurdle or you make that next breakthrough in something, just like with any other pursuit, like how long have you worked on something, Aaron, like trying to learn a particular riff or a solo that you've crashed and burned a million times on, but that million and one, you did it again and you were like, oh yeah, I got it now. And then it might take you 10 more times going through it before you finally get it, right? Or mastering a particular move or technique in jiu-jitsu, and that, trying to master that and rolling with somebody better than you, and they turn that around on you and they tie you up like a freaking pretzel, over and over and over again before you finally master that particular technique and stop letting it get used on you. It's the same thing in every other pursuit.
I think most of my fellow jiu-jitsu practitioners, both across from me and in our audience, can certainly talk about how many times you feel like, man, I freaking suck tonight.
Oh, dude, I left before I came on the show today. That's what I was out doing. I was out in the backyard at the range, and I shot 250 rounds today, and it wasn't easy. I shot everything at 25 to 35 yards, and my goal was to push shot splits to A zone hits at 25 yards, and then transitioning to a piece of steel. And I wanted the transition to be less than 0.5 of a second at 25 yards, and I wanted the splits to be 0.35 or less every single time on demand. Guess how much failure there was versus how much success there was? Yeah. The failure pot filled up really, really fast. The success pot, it trickled in, right? I mean, there were a few times I was like, okay, I'm done. And I'd look down and be like, nope, I've still got 50 rounds left. I'm gonna shoot that 50 rounds, and I'm not gonna do something that makes me feel good. I'm gonna continue burning this in until I'm satisfied. And sometimes, I mean, a lot of times, that's what's needed.
That's good stuff, Tim. Man, go ahead, Aaron.
I was just going to say that luckily for guitar, I just love practicing so much. It's funny. I have when you brought up the solo, I have a particular guitar solo by my favorite guitar player on a song called Vibrato. I can play that solo note for note. And yet I can probably play it right 40% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I still, funny, today I was working on it. It's almost like a classical musician will continue to work on a particular piece in their repertoire. It's just I am not close to the level of understanding, and I love to shoot, but I'm just still not at that level of passion and in-depthness in shooting as I am at that.
And
but
that's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
Right. But it's understanding, especially when you're 100% passionate about something else, right? Like the amount of grit and tenacity and determination that you have pursued, in guitar playing is what I have put into my pursuit as a pistol shooter.
Amen. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I can't pick up the guitar, and I've never played the guitar before. I can't pick up the guitar in 6 months, expect to be the player that you are right now. It's just not going to happen that way. Right.
But you understand
100%.
from parallel from across the skill continuum, you know
Correct.
exactly what I've gone through, and you know exactly how I would need to apply myself.
Correct.
So, yeah, awesome.
Excellent. Man, this is actually, that was the first topic, and we've covered 45 minutes of a master class and helping folks, including ourselves, understand the way we got to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome, Tim.
Consistency.
Yeah. And we know consistency, but how many times do we need to be reminded in a better way? I'll just put it that way.
Right.
How many times, every now and then, we need to be reminded in a much better way? And Tim, you exalted that for certain, buddy.
I appreciate that.
Let's segue into something that may be a little more, I don't know, a little more pigeonholed.
Okay.
And frankly, this is something that, as a newer dot shooter, I've been shooting a dot for 2 years, 3 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'd have to really look at that. I think it's only still been around 2 years. But it's something that consistently happens, and Aaron drove here for my birth. For goodness, that was a Freudian slip.
Mine too.
Mine too. For our birthday. That's hilarious, by the way. Aaron came here for our birthday weekend, and of course we put together some shooting training.
Mm-hmm.
Had a blast, and but again, not throwing out excuses. I think it's informative when not live firing for quite a bit this last year, or the last 6 months at least. I got pulled into the dot a bunch, which I felt like I really had gotten past. And so for you, professional shooter GM, I'll ask the first question. Do you ever get pulled into the dot still?
I don't find myself really getting pulled into the
Yep.
dot much. Maybe like extreme, like absolute extreme precision, like let's say a
Okay.
50-yard target where I really want to hit an A zone on demand. I would like to think that I'm not getting pulled into the dot, but I'm sure at some point I'm refining the dot to that specific spot on a target, probably a little bit more with the mindset, or not really with the mindset, but more with the visual accommodation being more towards more on the back of the glass, or the dot being perfectly steady when I break that shot versus superimposing the dot and staying more target focused. But I mean, I'd say probably 85 to 90% of my shooting with a dot, I don't find myself getting sucked into the dot very often.
And I honestly assume that with your level of shooting. So I appreciate you with that good answer. I'm curious, when you were a newer dot shooter, what were the most important methods for you to help make sure that you were not getting drawn? I mean, I'm assuming occluded dot.
No,
what did you work? Yeah.
I didn't really run the dot occlusion. I mean, can it be a tool? Sure. But as far as I must live and die by, sticking tape over the front of my optic to reduce the amount of information that my dominant eye sees, so that I can focus my attention on looking beyond that. I don't find that as helpful as a lot of people make it out to be. I do find it, like, definitively speaking, I think it can be a great training tool when used in very small doses, right? But to live and die by it, like, I get students in classes that are like, "Man, I've been running occluded with this gun," and they can't wait to show me that they've got their optic taped up, and man, I've been shooting with my optic occluded now for like 2.5 years. And I look at that and be like, what the hell's the matter with you? Like at some point in time, you got to take the training wheels off, bro. Like you need that extra information. So I think using it in small doses, like taking a paster and sticking a paster on the front of it, and maybe running a rep or two on a particular drill or exercise, just to ensure that you are truly being target focused, is good. And then take that crap back off and go about the rest of your training session. If for some reason that you feel like you're getting kind of sucked back into the dot again, then there are other methods that can help as well. How bright are you running the optic? How dim are you running the optic? If you're running it like on the far ends of either spectrum, if you're running the dot so bright that all you can see is the dot, then turn the damn thing down. If you're running the dot so dim that you are having a hard time even seeing or picking up the dot as you're superimposing it on a target, well, then chances are you're going to start looking around in the optic glass looking for the dot, then turn the damn thing up a notch or two so that you're not tempted to be looking directly at the dot.
Good answer. Yeah, that's excellent, buddy. Yeah, it is something that I felt like I stopped struggling with until I went that longer period without consistent live fire. Because my normal live fire isn't anything crazy, but typically it's once a week. When I'm home, I'm shooting once a week. My wife, it's kind of fun.
Sure.
My wife will go to the range with me. She sits there with me as I shoot. But her, in return for her, we get to go to a early dinner.
Yeah.
Somewhere. But it is absolutely one of the most fondest parts of my week is my wife and I, Jana, heading to the range. But for the last 6 months, that was next to non-existent. And it really came to a head recently about how my brain has gotten back to being pulled in. Now, full disclosure, since the last time Aaron and I shot together, I've been to the range 3 times, and I worked very, very hard on target focus, and I think I've kind of defeated that. But man, it's that fast that it can
for
happen.
me too. I mean, I've spent the majority of my shooting career behind iron sights. And with iron sights, I have never really subscribed to a hard front sight focus. Never have. I've always shot very much more target focused and just superimposing kind of blurry iron sights, to a target, and have learned to shoot at an extremely effective and high level, with target focus with iron sights. So moving to a dot, it pretty well just kind of happened by just kind of the normalcy of how I'm manipulating and how I'm aiming a gun to begin with. Just looking through an optic and superimposing the dot to the place I'm looking at on a target.
Yeah, I feel kind of cheated because as I've trained more, as I've been under the tutelage of lots of amazing shooters and instructors, yourself included, and I feel cheated because I've been told front sight focus for a million years.
Yeah.
And you get to almost any high level shooter that you talk to.
Right.
And it's almost like they're saying, that's BS. We've been shooting target focus the whole time.
Sure.
Now, I know that maybe someone's going to take issue with that when they're talking bullseye shooting. Maybe not. I don't know, but I could see someone take issue with that. But at the same time, the good thing is I can't see the front sight very well with irons anymore because of my bionic vision I have now. So it's been fun for me to shoot irons every now and then. Sometimes I can shoot irons, Eric. I haven't even brought this up. Sometimes I can shoot irons better than a dot right now.
Well, Aaron, I didn't speak with you about my last range trip, and it's funny, we can talk about it on the air right now. Is I try to shoot my 43, which is actually, I'll just pull it off right now, which is typically my house gun. Right?
Are you carrying that Israeli style?
No, negative. Israeli
Sorry,
style. Wait,
sorry.
are we talking about Hamas Israeli or?
No
Oh, I
round in
get.
the chamber.
Oh, no, I got you. Now I get it.
Sorry.
Lots of jokes to go around right there.
I'm sorry, guys. But yeah,
But
you were shooting your 43, which only has irons.
yeah, so I used to do that quite a bit this last year, but now I'm committing myself every range session to run some drills. And frankly, I was running half of the range master, one of the range master, just okay, throw it down on paper. And I actually had a blast shooting this little gun,
Mhm.
and I was quite surprised with my performance. But guess what? I was still more target focused until it got to 25, and then I was having to focus more on my front sight. But that was it's just kind of kismet that we're on that subject.
Mhm.
Shooting this little gun with irons I mean, at 15, I was target focused, and it occurred to me in that very point. It's like, yeah, it's kind of interesting seeing when you really when you really gather what in the heck you're doing yourself, when you get to analyze it, when many years ago maybe you just didn't have the bandwidth to understand it. And I'm not saying, I mean, I definitely at points in times in the past I was a better shooter than probably I am right now. Now I will tell you, groups on demand, 25-yard bull stuff, I'm way better at than when I was younger. But other skills I was better at.
Yeah.
So yeah, Aaron, what you got, man?
Well, Tim, we've taken up close to an hour of your time. We really appreciate it. So let's actually save what really is the best for last
Okay.
here. And it can be trite, but it really is the major difference between high performance and lower performance from the same individual, right? We're talking about one level of performance and then the much higher level of performance for a single person, and that's all within their mental game. Let's just use that phrase,
Mhm.
but it's really probably just self-image matching your skill set rather than your self-image being below your skill set, just as an example.
Sure.
But just having confidence in that self-image, and then also going deeper into how you control your mind when you're about to have to perform on demand. But can you give us some insight into your mental game, your preparation, how you handle yourself mentally at a match, etc.?
Sure.
Help us out with what you can
Well,
there.
a lot of it is obviously you're putting in the work ahead of time, right? Practices, dry fire, kind of leaving no stone unturned when it comes to pursuit of particular skill sets, right? I want to make sure that I have covered every base I possibly can. So that's where you build the confidence part of it, to know that I am practicing and working on things so much harder in my own practice and my own dry fire that anything that I see in a match, I can look at and be like, I can hit that, right? So, in knowing that's I'd say that's 85 to 90% of it. The part I think that's missing for many people, and this was taught to me years ago because we always talk about like learning how to learning how to reduce stress, right? Learning how to deal with pressure by trying to reduce pressure as much as we can, or so we hear, like kind of inoculating ourselves to it, like being able to, kind of reduce the pressure by just continuously putting ourselves in somewhat of pressure sensitive kind of mindset and learning how to stay calm. I'm gonna tell you right now, nothing is more bogus. Like there is no such thing as like learning to reduce pressure in practice then turns into, well, I just go to a match and I never feel pressure. So a very, very high ranking individual shooter, and I've asked a multitude of other high performing shooters, like even beyond my level, like guys that have won multiple national or world titles, like world championship shooters, and ask them like, what's the difference? And the biggest takeaway I got from them was, Tim, you're not practicing right if you're practicing all the time in a feel good state, there's no pressure, there's no there's no pressure to perform, there's no mental anxiety, or no hard push on anything. Like, you're doing yourself a disservice, because then you don't know what to do with that level of pressure when you're actually when you're given that level of pressure, right? Like, it doesn't come from trying to reduce pressure. You need to learn to, you need to learn to execute within that. Like, it takes exposure to pressure. So, guys like Lanny Basham and, mental management and things like that, we'll talk a lot about, like, having a good self-confidence level, or being able to speak to yourself in a way where you know how to handle pressure. But the only way to truly know how you're going to handle pressure is to continuously expose yourself to pressure and learn that pressure is normal, and that anxiety is something that needs to be learned to be controlled within and not reduced. So that was been the biggest one. So, like, in my own practice habits, I make I make things hurt for a reason in practice. A lot of it is like, I put the pressure on myself to, I need to do it the first time. Like, not saying one and done, but I need to be able, like, my cold performance is also sometimes my most important performance in practice. Um,
Because that's what you're doing on a stage, right? You're
Absolutely.
doing that stage cold,
Right.
right?
So I give a lot less merit to, like, whatever my hard skills are towards the end of a practice session, or how good I'm feeling after 20 reps of something, and now that I've shaken out the nerves, I can really perform, because guess what? You don't get to do that in a match. So a lot of my personal practice involves putting undue stress and pressure on myself, so that I am kind of inoculated to it, or exposed to it to a level to where, instead of trying to reduce it, we talk about breathing techniques, and we talk about, like the 4 second breath in and hold it for 4 seconds, and then breathing out, and trying to reduce that level of pressure. And I'm more of a, forget that. Like, I need to be exposed to pressure and anxiety all the time, so that it becomes normal. So now when I go to matches, if I'm not feeling a heightened sense of awareness, or a heightened sense of just some sort of pressure to perform, I now ask myself, like, what the hell's wrong? What's going on? Like, why am I not feeling just that little bit of, like, the heebie-jeebies when you step up to the step on the line and make ready? Like, I need, and this comes from other people telling me the exact same thing. In fact, I had a long conversation years ago with Ben Steger, and this was after a really tough year I had, where I failed miserably at nationals that year. And Ben was like, "We should talk about it on my podcast." And I was like, "I don't want to relive that shit ever again." And Ben's like, "No, there's some definite things we need to talk about." And the big thing he talked about was, he asked me, was like, "What do you do in your own practice? Like, just practice. Like, are you always trying to, like, kind of reduce pressure and just have a good time with it? And you're doing things that you feel good about?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, then you're practicing wrong." I'm like, "Oh, I'm practicing wrong? Like, God, how dare you?" And he's like, "No, seriously. Like, you're not ever going to know how to perform within the level of pressure needed to win a national level match if you're not exposing yourself to that level of pressure all the time."
Excuse
He
me.
said, "You need to change your habits in practice and make things hurt. Like, you got to punish yourself in some way. You've got to put the pressure on yourself to perform every single time." And he was right. I mean, he was 100% right. So going to major matches thereafter, like, I feel like now I thrive a lot within that level of pressure. I need that, because, like I said, if it's missing, there's something wrong. I'm either too relaxed, I'm not taking I'm not being for serious enough about the particular match, or whatever the case may be. And if that's the case, why am I there? You know?
Well, Tim, can I ask you something? Because you
Sure.
made me think about my own personal training, and maybe this isn't as necessary at your level, but maybe it is at mine. Um, is do I need to strive to get peers to the range with me to be able to? Because let's face it, when we're shooting with peers, we add additional pressure, right?
That can help. Or you've got to
I don't
find
know
ways.
how important that is. Go
You've got
ahead.
to find ways to put pressure on yourself, right? For me, it was like stop being so forgiving of myself when I
Yep.
shoot
Oh
like a
yeah.
delta or when I shoot a no shoot or I shoot a mic. Like you got to stop doing the like, oh well, that never happened. Like I'll do over. I'm calling for a mulligan. I'm going to do it again, right? Like it, and a lot of it too is like if you botch a draw and you get a terrible grip out of the gun, like out of the holster with the gun, a lot of times we go, oh, that didn't count, and you'll put the gun right by the holster and you'll start that rep over again. It depends on what I'm working on. Like in practice, in live fire practice, there's no do-overs on that. So I'm going to adopt, like I need to either fix it or work within it and figure out like what, and then after the fact, learn what caused that particular incident. Like, is it something I need to really focus on again in dry fire? Like so that I can myelinate a better pathway so that I don't make that same mistake again. But at the same time, like making things hurt a lot of times. And when I mean hurt, I don't mean physically hurt. Although it can be, it could be like, oh man, for every single time that I miss the target or I miss my intended point of aim, I got to do 25 push-ups. Or I do a thing. This is something I learned from a couple of instructors back in the old Federal Air Marshal program called Mag Jail. You take a magazine. If you've ever trained with Mike Seeklander's a big proponent of Mag Jail. Where it's like if you miss or screw up the particular drill, or you shoot a delta on a target, or you shoot a down 3, or you shoot a no shoot, then you take one of your fresh magazines off your belt that you haven't shot with, and that gets set on a barrel, and that's 20 rounds of less ammunition that you get to shoot that practice session.
Oh wow.
Like if you can't straighten
I
your shit out, then you got to figure out a way to do that, right? So a lot of it for me also is I run everything in averages now. So I don't just take a one and done like, okay, there was my PR.
nice.
I start looking at
Mm.
averages, high and low. So
Oh, I like that, buddy.
I
I'm
include my
writing it down.
crappy runs just as much as I include my good runs on things. That way, like I have to be as accountable for the bad stuff as I do the good stuff. You don't just get to pick and
Yeah, I
choose the
like
good
that.
stuff that you did in practice and go, okay, none of the bad happened because it's practice. No, it counts just as much as the good stuff does. And you got to make it count.
I like that a lot.
So, but for mental management, I found that that's helped me immensely. Like putting that level of pressure and anxiety on myself in practice then becomes like like I'm so used to that level of pressure now when I go to major matches. It it's almost a non-issue. Self-reflection, obviously having a a mission statement for yourself, I think is definitely good. And then learning too that like in practice, your your conscious self is doing a lot of the control work to teach your subconscious self to just perform. And then on game day, conscious self stays the hell out of it and
Mm.
allows conscious self to just or subconscious self to just perform. Right? You cannot be
Excellent.
your biggest advocate, your biggest coach, your biggest critic in in real time at the match or in a stage or in a particular drill. You have to trust that your subconscious level is going to do what it's going to do. And then afterwards, when you're done, then you allow your conscious self to say, okay, now what was going on? What did I notice that subconscious self was or wasn't doing? And what conscious effort do I need to change and tweak so that subconscious can then take over again and I get the hell out of my own way?
Nice.
A great book to learn how to really do that is a book written by a gentleman by the name of Timothy Galway called The Inner Game of Tennis. And it was
Hmm.
written in 1976.
We're always interested in performance books. So Timothy Galway.
Timothy Galway, Gallwey, Timothy Galway, called The Inner Game of Tennis. I find that particular book to be a better mental management read than, and I know this might be blasphemous, but I find it a better book for me personally than the mental management series or With Winning in Mind.
So full disclosure, as you know, we're a big mental management proponent because of past usage. I think what's important to what Aaron and I are all about gaining different perspectives
Sure.
and pulling from wherever we can gain additional performance. So I do believe in the mental management. Absolutely,
Sure.
it's helped me with a lot of major goals. One of them, one of them was Master Class and IDPA. That many years ago, I look back. I guess it was 2003. But yes, anything, there can be an amalgamation that just might be a key for us, and maybe we find something in that book that may really be what we need to hear. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to pick that book up, buddy.
Excellent.
Cool. Well, Aaron, what you think, man? I mean, this is a little bit short of what we've been doing lately, but man, I think we've covered so much excellent information, man. I think we might just close this out. What do you think?
Yeah, it's been a good show, and I think we've been efficient, and we've cut to the chase on a lot of important aspects, and I like how Tim didn't answer that first question probably the way me or other listeners may have
Yeah.
expected, but it was an excellent way to take the show and to cover that topic. So I really enjoyed that, Tim.
Awesome.
I'll just, Aaron, I'm sorry, buddy. I keep cutting you
You're
off
fine.
this evening. I'll just add, I think that was the answer we needed to hear.
Mm-hmm. Maybe not what we expected or wanted, but what we needed to hear. I agree.
Yep. Yep. Awesome.
Well, gentlemen, let's go ahead and call it a night. This has been a great show, and I think, as Eric alluded to, a master class driving down the road, listening to your podcast in your car. So there's a lot to learn in listening to this episode, in my opinion. So thanks again for spending your time with us and our listeners, Tim.
It's my pleasure.
It's an honor to be able to reach out to you and sometimes pick your brain. Even when we're not doing shows.
Sure.
Thanks for taking questions from us from time to time. It's great having a friend like you, a text away when you're kind of struggling with something or debating something. So thanks again for all that you support us with being on the show and those kinds of things too.
No, I appreciate it. My pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, and where can everybody reach you?
So like my website, which is timherronshooting.com. I've also got a YouTube channel, so I've got lots of videos and things like that, a bunch of how-to stuff as well on YouTube, which is also Tim Herron Shooting. You can find me on Instagram at Tim Herron Shooting. You see the the pathway there.
Yeah.
But I'm also I'm on Facebook, either Tim Herron or Tim Herron Shooting as well. So you can send me a direct message or private message or whatever, or send me an email. I'd love to be able to answer questions or help out however I can.
And we will throw all of that in the show notes.
Sweet.
Awesome. Well, Tim, it's been awesome hanging out with you, buddy. It's time to get together again soon, sometime.
Definitely.
All right, brother. You have a blessed evening. Aaron, you as well, my twin.
All right, guys. Take it easy.
All right. Thanks, guys.